Hey, what's up, everybody? Before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to shout out our sponsors for our upcoming Gajograd Ablaze Bolt Action event. First and foremost, Gajo Games in Sandy, Utah, world-class storefront and wargaming space. Warlord Games, their event support has been fantastic. If you're running an event, make sure to reach out to them. Rubicon Models. Rubicon has sponsored every event we have put on with their incredible vehicle kits. Father and Son Games, fantastic MDF terrain and gaming accessories at amazing prices. Baron of Dice, dice that is equally balanced and detailed that has no rival. Trenchworks, simply put, the best resin kits in the business. And Bud's Blast Markers. They make some super cool explosion markers and gaming accessories. Welcome back to the SLCCAST. This is episode 3, where we cover the goings-ons of the bolt action community here in Salt Lake City. We have a lot of events that are going on here. We have a really great community and some really interesting players. So we just want to make sure that we are highlighting all the exciting stuff that's happening here in Salt Lake City and the Intermountain West in general. Tonight we have a really fun topic because previous episodes, we have recapped events that have already happened. Today, we're going to be previewing one. But of course, I don't want to just be here talking by myself, and you guys wouldn't like that either. So to help me out, I've got my good friend Brad. Brad, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How you doing tonight, Jordan?
I'm doing good. I've got a cough drop in, and I've got decaf coffee here on the desk, so I'm ready to go nuts. Tonight's just going to be bananas. But Brad, you are you are a wargamer of many talents. I primarily focus on bolt action, but it seems like you've got your hands in almost every game that's out there, and you do it really well. But you've been a really great part of this community. You're always positive, and it's always fun to have you around. Just get like, could you just give us maybe like a quick background on what you're interested in wargaming right now?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here. Yeah, it's been fun to be part of the community. I've actually, compared to a lot of other people, I haven't been wargaming for all that long. I started, I don't know, about 5 years ago. It was interesting because I've played in the past a fair amount of video games, not so much as now as I got more into wargaming, but I was kind of on this cycle of always looking for new games, trying to find one that clicked. And one day I seen a bunch of memes about Warhammer, and I ended up looking at some battle reports, tabletop tactics and mini wargaming and stuff, and it just kind of caught my eye, and I was enthralled. And so yeah, I got into Warhammer and really enjoyed 40K for a long time. Met some really cool people. Kind of got a feel for wargaming, dipping my toe in painting. Painting was definitely not my favorite at first, and has now actually become one of my favorite things. But yeah, I started dipping my toes into other war games, and for me, wargaming is all about telling really cool stories, but also I do kind of like the strategy, like understanding the rules and a little bit of the math and probability. I work with a lot of math and at work, and so just telling stories and letting dice help with that. Like, I've always liked the idea of writing stories, but I'd be afraid of making a character too powerful or not a balanced story. And so dice are such a fun way of making things random, and you just get these awesome moments. And, so just kind of the strategy, the positioning, and the storytelling is really interesting. And, so that was naturally of why I got into games like Bolt Action and Flames of War. Is I've always been interested in World War II, trying to understand it better. Um, because it is a big part of just it's led to so many things today, and it just trying to get just understand it better and understand stories and things like that. And so yeah, that's kind of how I got into wargaming and into bolt action specifically.
Yeah, I find that bolt action specifically and other war games are a really good launching point for people to jump into the history and get to learn about the conflict, the lessons it teaches, and I The equipment is cool too. You know, like the tanks and the planes and everything. That's all super interesting. And bolt action kind of is a nice path to get someone who maybe, you know, jumping into history isn't their first go to. You know, it kind of gives them a nice avenue to explore that history. But speaking of bolt action, we had a nice little game recently, didn't we?
It was sweet.
I think we've only played bolt action twice, including this recent game. So we got together. I think we played 950 points. I brought my Romanians out. They've been kind of on the shelf since LVO last year. I think I spent so much time on my Romanians, getting them, you know, painted up and ready for LVO, and then actually playing them in the event. I was done with them. I had to do something else. So they had been sitting on my shelf until Warlord released the Case Blue campaign book. They got a whole new set of special rules, and I had to try them out. Uh, but what did you bring to the game?
Well, you graciously helped. I brought the United States, and I've just started working on a U.S. Army, trying to do kind of a invasion of Italy, of Sicily kind of theme, messing around with basing. And I've painted up a couple of squads, and you were kind enough to let me kind of borrow some stuff to fill out the rest. In the past, I've played Finland, and it's got enough special rules, and kind of in our group, it felt like sometimes it feels like a lot and just doesn't lead to a good game experience for everyone. And so I wanted something a little more generic that kind of can fit more vibes. The United States was in a lot of theaters, and just trying a new change of pace. So yeah, I brought Americans for the first time ever.
Yeah, and it turned out to be a pretty interesting battle. We played a scenario out of the Bold Action Alliance scenario pack. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my mind, but you have basically three objectives on the center line, and then two that are kind of offset, but they're almost all in a line near or on the center of the table. And we just duked it out. Um, I remember specifically feeling like I had the upper hand, and so one of Romania's new rules in the Case Blue book is I get to put certain units in outflank, and they start outflanking a turn earlier, meaning when they do come on, they come on a little bit farther than a normal outflanking unit usually would. And I remember sweeping up that left side and feeling like I really had things under control. And it's funny, you mentioned dice telling stories, and the dice told a very specific story for me. Do you remember
Yeah,
the setup
it
for
was
that?
well, it's really interesting. Yeah, because if I remember right, you were outflanking with mountaineers, and the way the terrain was set up, like the objective was in a group of ruins that really slowed people down, and you were able to move through it faster and kind of approach from an angle where you could kind of avoid. I was kind of doing some Overwatch, kind of just putting my guys on ambush, and you're able to kind of in such a way to kind of trigger it early, not really give me a lot of good shots. I think I got 2 or 3 shots out of the whole like 10-man squad. Um, and yeah, you were able to take the objective, but then you kind of got stuck in there, if I remember right, because I had a different squad and a Sherman tank kind of on the edge, and so you were able to take it really well, but getting back out and pushing through, you kind of got stuck a little bit.
Yeah, that was on the far flank for me, and then the objectives in the center became really important. But you know what? I had the chance to take them. I had my engineer squad run up with my lieutenant, who is extra brave because he gets a buff in the new Romanian special rules.
That's
You
right.
had a squad and a lieutenant, I believe, on the objective that mattered, and
Yeah,
I had my flamethrower within 2 inches, I believe, and I pulled the first dice of the last turn, and my revenge was incoming. It was going to be hot fire until I rolled a one, and I
yeah,
needed
and
anything but a one.
well, and I don't know what it is, but like I've happened to not play a ton of people with flamethrowers, but every time someone with a flamethrower plays me, they always pull ones. Like it's happened like 3 or 4 distinct times. Like once in Rumble in the Rubble, once in Gajograd. Like my luck can't last this long. But for some reason, I just have an aura of roll ones when you got a flamethrower.
That's a nice perk to have. I wish I could get
Yeah.
some of that.
I
uh,
just as long as I never bank on it, because the second it's like you will roll a one, then I'm screwed.
yep. There you go. Well, for flamethrowers, it's not just to hit, because then I have rolled a one for running out of fuel way
Mm.
more times than I ought to. It's kind of like indirect fire. I feel like hitting on sixes happens way more than it statistically should, but
Yeah,
that's
especially if
just,
it's a medium mortar.
oh yes, my most precious asset. But yeah, man, it was an awesome game. You ended up pulling out the win. It was really good to play you again. It's been a while. But listeners out there, you might be wondering, like, why are we talking about this game that we played? It's because it kind of relates to a bolt action event that is upcoming here in Salt Lake City. Um, so for today on this episode, we are previewing Gajograd Ablaze. This is the fourth annual Gajograd event. Um, we've held it here the last 3 years in Salt Lake City at Gajo Games, hence the name Gajograd. Gajograd has always been a Axis versus Allies team event. It really started out kind of in the spirit of Operation Snafu. If you've ever listened to the Snafu podcast, that event is also a team event with some funky and fun things going on with different tables and objectives. But after the first year of Gajograd, we kind of split off and started doing uh, something a little bit different from what Snafu is doing, and where we focus on what these different tables that are available like can provide as far as bonuses. Teams work out who plays on what table, and then what objectives they want to go after, which in turn gives them bonuses for their team. So this year the event is happening on April 20th, 2024. We are bringing back the Megatron format as far as armies are concerned. This is Alistair Unicom's format that he runs over in the UK. This is theater selectors only, and only one of each theater selector is allowed. So when a player registers, they get their choice of theater selector as long as it hasn't already been chosen by a registered player, and then they lock it down. Uh, of course, if you register and you choose a selector, you can always change it to one that's not been already taken. But you do have the ability to lock one down as well. Um, and again, the way that Gajograd works, really starting last year, we kind of moved away from individual scoring going into an overall team score. What we had was what's called table sectors. So, say we have 12 tables. Well, every 4 tables is a sector. And then when your team wins on a table, it goes towards the tally for that sector. So, say you have 4 tables in a sector, your team wins 3, the other team wins 1. You have won that sector. And then once you win a sector, you get a point for winning it. So, that kind of, at least last year, it really helped bring the scores closer. We only had, I think, 3 sectors or maybe 4. So
I think it was four.
yeah, there was never be a huge blowout. Um,
Well, and
eh,
I really like it because our community is a really even match between like competitive players and players that are just there to roll dice and do fun things. And the sectors help kind of, sure, it's a tournament, but it kind of relieves some of the pressure and is one of those cool valves. I think you've put a lot of valves into Gajograd to make it anyone of any skill level can come in and have fun, and like there's that team camaraderie, but like not like necessarily the same pressure of, oh, you don't want to let the team down, because it's just a little more diffused throughout the whole team.
yeah, that's really been the goal. I think trying to please everybody is not the way you should write like an event. But that's what I've been trying to do, and it's been a bit of trial and error. But the idea, again, it's called Gajo Grad because it's at Gajo Games, which is an amazing store. that's super supportive and has everything you could ever need. But the idea is like we want to celebrate just the awesome community that we have here. And like you said, there's a good mix of different players who, some want to be really competitive. Some really are, want to literally build out a historical platoon, and everything in between. So
Some people just want giant tanks.
some people want nothing but tanks. And we hear about it all the time in the community Discord. Um, so yeah, Gajograd is kind of trying to tailor to all of those things, and we'll get into the details of how that's going to work. Um, but outside of Brad, just you being a good friend of mine, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because not only are you a part of the community, you also the previous two Gajograds, you were the highest scoring player for each of the last two events, and last year you were the Axis captain. So how about you kind of just give us a little bit of a rundown of like what captaining was like at last year's Gajograd event?
Yeah, kind of two parts, right? There's kind of the preparatory stage and then kind of the day of. Um, and so what was kind of cool is Discord and the technology we have allows for so much cool things. And so you were able to make like an Access and Allied channel where we'd go in and so try to help lead discussion among the Axis of like, okay, what's our strategy? What are our goals? Understanding some of the different sectors, and every round there was like bonuses we could get, and so which bonuses fit the best. And it was really interesting because it's kind of fun. Some people want help making balanced lists. Like what's the best list to take, and so trying to encourage tuning up their list for those people that want it, but also maintaining just that fun thematic experience. We had one player, I think it was Mike, who wanted to run kind of, I forget what the theater selector is called, but it was basically a bunch of Germans pretending to be Americans. And so he had just this fun, zany list where he couldn't even be targeted until he got really close. And it was goofy, it was fun, but he was worried he's going to let the team down. It's like, no, man, have fun with it, do something cool, And so my goal as the captain was to very much encourage all play styles. Everyone can come and let people have fun with the creative lists they want to do and find a way to bring it all together to ensure the team as a whole did well. And so that was really fun. Um, I feel like a lot of times in wargaming we get really aspirational. We have all these goals, or we want to do these big things, big campaigns and big events. And so this Gajograd with having this little Discord server, with the Access chat, I felt like did a good step towards actually building that camaraderie. Like, some players didn't necessarily care. They're just like, yeah, just tell me what to do. I want to roll dice. And that's great. But it also did give us a little bit of a stepping stone to help invite people to kind of interact more with each other and plan ways to support each other. And so, yeah, a big part of it was, I will harp on a joke that you always make: read the event pack. So many people don't read the event pack, or they only read it once. And like,
Yeah.
we have the new event pack for the new Gajograd, and I've read it a couple of times, and I still feel like I'm processing it. I think it's something that takes a lot of time, and so it was fun to sit down and be like, hey, I read the event pack. This is what I see. The way you set it up, yeah, you got these different sectors, these different tables that are different themes. You had like the Normandy table, and to have kind of our more local feel. You had the Utah National Parks table and the Wasatch
Hmm.
Front table, and they all had these different bonuses. And going through, okay, which bonuses make the most sense, and when. There was a bonus that gave us more victory points. So it's like we have to get that table because that alone could win the game. But when
Yeah.
was the right time? Because getting it sacrificed, like calling in extra artillery support, and so timing it to get it at the last possible second to maximize other points. So it was really fun chatting back and forth and kind of keeping that on kind of process. Letting people talk it through was a really good way to just get everyone excited. And so that was kind of like the prep work. And then kind of the day of, right, is
Hmm.
you I guess one of the really cool unique things that I really liked from kind of a generalship point of view is you kind of told us the style of the tables would be. The national parks table will be open. It'll be a lot of open terrain. Kind of, okay, well, we didn't know exactly what the table was going to look like. We knew the Wasatch Front table was going to have a ton of mountains, so we can theorize. Okay, hey, you have a mechanized list. You can move really quick and maybe use some of your mechanized units to give you more or less cover in what will probably be a coverless map, and then
Yep.
okay, you have some mountaineers, so I can keep you in reserve when we really need to take the Wasatch Front for the artillery support. And so, but then the day of, it's like, okay, let's look at the tables and see what they physically look like. And so being able to do that on the fly was pretty important. And just getting
Mhm.
like the players excited. Like there was one player, I think he was from Idaho. He's one of the guys that drives out. He had a German Schwimm wagon mechanized list. And
Yes.
it was like one of my favorite just jokes of the whole event is sending the Schwimmwagen mechanized list into the deserts of Utah to conquer the area. And they did it. It was sweet. It was goofy as all could be, but like it was a good way to pair it up and everyone was having a good time and cheering it on and like it helped keep everyone interested in each other's games and like telling a story, our German Marines in the desert. It was hilarious,
Yeah. Yeah,
Um
it's fun when people kind of lean into it, and I don't know if it's the team format or even like the theater selectors, um, or just a combination of all the things. We also kind of have like some narratives around what's going on at Gajograd, which is always fun. So like just the players getting excited about it, and it's more than just okay, here's 1,000 points, show up and play some people, and hopefully you're the best. If not, well, we'll go home. That like
yeah.
it's got to. What I'm aiming for is a mix of all those things, like that you mentioned. There's the planning beforehand with the Discord servers for the Axis and Allies, which I love being able to follow and see what everyone's talking about. It's extra fun because I'm on the outside of it. I can look at both channels and see what the Axis is theorizing the Allies are doing and how they're right or wrong. Like that is so much fun. Um, but
Well,
then,
it really adds a layer to like, in wargaming, obviously wargaming, we mostly do it for fun. It's not real war and that's for the best, right? But
Mhm.
it added a whole nother layer to the simulation aspect, right? Of like, okay, Drake, another player in the community, was the Allied captain. Know him pretty well. He's a great player. And so it was kind of the whole can I guess what's in his head and what he's going to use with the forces that showed up for him. And so a couple of players going, oh, I'll go scout out and see what lists the Allies brought. And, oh, this guy's got this. I think this is what he's going to do. And so, yeah, it added that whole like intelligence aspect to the game of trying to outmaneuver your opponent before you even got to the table. So that level of strategy that you don't always necessarily get in a tactical, tabletop war game.
Yeah, exactly. That's the leading up to the event, between rounds, all of that kind of interaction. I just live for that. It's so much fun, and it makes the games rich. But then, of course, if you do want to just show up, roll some dice, you don't really have to participate in all those, the strategy sessions or anything. And you mentioned it earlier. There's not pressure because we'll get into kind of how objective tables work in a minute. But not everyone is really being counted on to an extreme degree. You of course want to win your table, so it goes towards the sector points, but that's why there's 4 tables in a sector, so it's not just all on you. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was really cool seeing you and Drake, who captained the Allies, work with your team and plan stuff out, and for an initial run of that kind of uh, command and control isn't the right word, but that kind of interaction between players and tables and objectives and all that stuff. I thought it went well, and it was really fun to see everyone getting into it. But let's start to dissect the pack a little bit this year, because I did learn a lot from last year. There are some things that have changed, and I kind of want to discuss those things. But real briefly, this year we have a 30-player limit. So last year, I think we had 28 players registered at one point. We have I think we have access for 22 players upstairs. And then Gajo Games recently redid their basement. It looks super nice down there. It's kind of the historical area now. Um, but we have room for 5 more tables, so that gives us a 30-player cap, which is super exciting. It will mean some running up and down the stairs for at least me, running between tables while the games are going on. But if it means we get more players in, I think that's always a good thing. Um,
Yeah, it's exciting because I think you've had to turn people away a couple of times, and man, does that feel bad, and yeah, running up and down stairs just adds another level of realism, right? And then you got your dispatchers and things like that, so kind of fun.
exactly. I think I will put Sean in the basement, and I'll get a walkie-talkie, and him and I can just go back and forth, and then I don't have to do stairs. Well, for this year, another change that we have is a casual and a competitive pool of players. So, I mentioned earlier, you probably shouldn't design an event to try and make everybody happy, but here we are. Again, we're celebrating the community, so I want everyone to feel like they can come and play, no matter their play style or kind of what their goals are. Um, but we do have these 2 pools now. So as a player, when you register, you'll let me know if you want to be in the competitive or the casual pool. There's not like a real defining line there. It's kind of, if you've been playing for a really long time and you have been, basically near the top every year, like I'm gonna put you in the competitive pool. You know what you're doing. Brad, you won't be sneaking into the casual pool, and neither will you, Drake. But uh, that with the casual pool, I'll have a little more say in what you're putting in your list. If you say you want to play in the casual pool, and you say, "Here's my, 2 multi-launcher, multiple machine gun Stewart list with Gurkhas," I'm gonna write you an email and be like, let's tone this back a bit. Not exactly what we're going for, or we'll bump you up to competitive. Um, but the reason why I'm putting this in is last year I I did away with pairing winners with winners and players that lost against other players that lost. Just trying to make it easier on myself, honestly, is kind of a selfish thing, but I figured instead of trying to sort all that out on my spreadsheet, why don't I just rotate the players? So like the Axis players would rotate 2 tables to the left, Allied players would rotate 2 tables to the right. And in theory, you would have a unique opponent and a unique table. We're only doing 3 games, so that's not even really a theory. You definitely would have unique players and tables. The problem with that is, when you have players with different experience or mindsets or goals or methods of play, uh, if you have someone it's one of their first games versus someone who comes with a super tooled up list, it doesn't really make for a great experience for either player. We're not really concerned about, the finding out who the best bolt action player is. That's not really what this event is. So, having a real imbalanced game is kind of a bummer for both players. So we have this
Yeah,
pool. Go ahead.
I'm excited for this because yeah, I was one of those players. My last game last year was against a guy who was newer and just there trying to have fun and like just the way I had set up. Finland has that ambush rule, right? And so
Hmm.
I was playing really aggressive. I kind of got into where I needed to be, and he just couldn't get through the ambush, and it wasn't fun. Like I felt actively bad because it didn't feel like he was having a good time, and I'm still convinced that part of the only reason I even won last year is I didn't play Drake directly. Drake is very much my nemesis. He and I go back and forth in games all the time, and he plays vehicle heavy, and I can struggle fighting vehicles in my lists, and so I am excited to yeah. It's kind of there's these different pools. It'll be more based on win rate, just to make sure everyone's having a good time, and yeah, it'll be more fun that way. I think for everyone.
Yeah, that's definitely the goal. We had a few games that were kind of like your third game experience, and you know you can't always control that. Sometimes it just happens, no matter what you do. But there's definitely some improvements that we could have made, and we are making for this year. That will alleviate that a bit. So we'll have the different pools. So you will play against players inside your own pool. Now, the only time that will change is say you're in the casual pool and you're just kicking butt, and there's somebody in the competitive pool who's having a real hard time. Or we have an odd number of players. There's a very slim chance that you'll play outside that pool. But again, with only 3 games, it's probably not going to happen. But yeah, then we definitely will be going back to pairing winners against winners, and uh, you know that's a much better way to match up players. And what we also had last year was I can't remember off the top of my head, we had 4 or 5 players, I believe, that had won all their games. So that makes that makes the end of the day with like prizes and everything really odd. Again, we're not trying to find the best player, but we had someone who's like, "Oh, I won all 3 of my games. I did good on secondaries. I really had a great day." And then to kind of like walk away with no recognition or anything is kind of tough. So we're setting this year up for players to come and know what to expect, and to have 3 great games of bolt action, and that's really the goal.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this next year. I think we'll get into it in a second, but there's a couple other tweaks, and it all comes together. I think it'll be really fun. It's one of the fun things about Gajograd is always just trying new things and little tweaks, and just can't please everyone. It can't be perfect, but my goodness, really been impressed with all the work you and Sean have put in, and it's always a lot of fun. And I've played in a couple of other tournaments. Honestly, tournaments aren't really my thing. I like to play well, but I like to play narratively, and I don't necessarily like the like, oh, you got to score in the top 3 or whatever. And so that's where Gajograd is such a unique tournament of everything I played on. It is more about the story, and and it's more focused on the team ranking, and it's very different compared to a lot of other tournaments I've seen and been to.
I mean, it's fun to run. Even it's so fun to see it all come together. And I talk about kind of the shortcomings we ran into last year, but everyone was excellent to each other. Everyone took took things in stride when there was a couple mismatches. So that just speaks to how amazing our community is and how great the players are. So yeah, really looking forward to this upcoming year and kind of ironing all that out and just having a great day of bolt action. Let's talk about our force composition a little bit. I have had a bit of back and forth on this from a couple people, and that's fine.
I'll just say I think you're in the right. I think the first thing is I bet you're getting the pushback on the 950 points. I am
Yes.
100% on board for 950 points.
Well, Brad, that's why I brought you on this show, because you're agreeing with me.
I'll disagree with everything you say.
Yes, that was the stipulation for doing this with me. I kid. Points are interesting. I think the first 2 years we did 800 points, basically just a nice low amount, but you could still bring some of the fun toys. You of course couldn't bring all the toys. But it was also, our community was kind of in its younger stages and didn't really want to bog players down with long games or anything, especially when you're trying to do 3 games in a day. Time and schedule is the most important thing. So last year we did 1,000 points, and I mean, if you look around the world, what's happening with bolt action right now, a lot of different events are moving away from 1,000 or 1,250, which is kind of the norms. 1,100 points is a really popular format right now. Going down to like a combat patrol, which I think is sub 800 points. That's also making a comeback. So with 950, what I wanted to do was, 1,000 was nice. let's have a unique number so you can't just bring your 1,000 point list that you bring to every event. But even cutting back 50 points makes a difference because you kind of have to reevaluate what you're putting into your army. Because I do really like making players make decisions on their list.
Well, and
In the
that's why. Sorry, that's why I'm so excited for 950 because I think 800 was fun, and you're right, it made for a quicker game, but sometimes it didn't feel like you could even bring enough tools for just the type of lists out there.
Mhm.
If they're SKU lists, where 950, you still have to make some decisions, but it does. Yeah, it feels kind of a sweet spot where you have to make a couple of decisions and be ready for a few things, but yeah, you can't bring everything, but you can make a good go of it. And for
Mhm.
me personally, like I am a little bit selfishly glad it's 950, because before I played Bolt Action, I played Flames of War, and Flames of War, is kind of a different scale, both literally, but also it's more company, where Bolt Action's more platoon, and I actually like more of the infantryman's tale. I like vehicles being rare, and so you know some people are still going to fit two or three vehicles in the 950 points, and that's great. But just I like it when there's maybe one tank, and basically all my lists, just because I enjoy it, I usually start with, okay, how do I fit four infantry squads, and then what else can I put around that. So I like that it a little bit makes it focus more on the infantry, because to me personally, and again, it's just me, Bolt Action is the infantryman's tale, and that's kind of the level I like my story to be told at.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, if you want to do something like lots of vehicles or lots of artillery, the theater selectors open you up to that. But at this points level, you kind of have to commit to it. So it's like,
Hmm.
I'm going to take a bunch of vehicles, but I'm not going to have very many points for infantry. So I have to commit to using those armored vehicles in a way that, allows the infantry to take objectives or whatever, or just kind of that balance. And I think balance is the key word for this event for me this year, is weighing up all those different options. Whether it's your army list or uh, your objective tables, all these different things. I really enjoy a balance. So 950 points. We're doing an 18 order dice limit. I don't really expect to see many lists at this level. Again, that's just kind of a thing for time, because there's a lot of selectors out there that let you do some crazy stuff. So, if you have more than 18 dice in the bag just for your army, it slows the game down. And this is the first time I've put an order dice limit in, so we'll see how it goes. But I kind of just, wanted to make sure games were finishing on time. And at 950 points, 18 order dice is a pretty high dice count. So I feel
Yeah,
pretty, I feel good about that.
I don't think I've ever been like, oh, I'll take this, you know, transport or horse or something to get the extra order die. That's just never been something I've done. And yeah, I feel like my most of the lists I've looked at are roughly 12 order dice. So 18 sounds fun for when you want to do goofy little things, or lots of little transports and little squads. It still lets people have creative fun, but yeah, it keeps the game moving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I already mentioned this before, but this is theater selectors only. So player registers, they claim a theater selector. There can only be one of each theater selector, and you cannot play the same selector as the previous year. This just keeps things fresh. Of course, if you play some kind of obscure army, a minor power, or you want to do something weird that doesn't have a selector or options, please email me or message me. Let me know. We'll definitely get that worked out, because bringing something you're excited about is more important. Uh,
And it really added some really cool things. Like so last year I played my Finnish, and I wasn't the first person playing Finland to sign up. And I'm forgetting the name of the selector, but there's one selector that's kind of the general late war Finland, and that one had been picked. And so there was only one other selector that would let me take a Panzerschreck. My pickle was Panzerschreck's the only anti-tank I have built and painted. I had a couple
Mhm.
Panzerfausts, but so it's either it was like the Lapland War where you can't take any veterans, and there's just a couple of cool,
Yep.
weird things I had to work around to take a Panzerschreck. Otherwise, I'd have to do like early war and take like an AT rifle. Knew that wasn't going to fly for my more infantry focused builds, and so yeah, it forced a cool decision, and it's really fun to have to choose a different selector.
And if you want to lock down a selector, make sure you register. It's a
Yeah,
really great tool to get players on board. I think we were sold out like 3 or 4 months before the event. We did have a schedule change, so that's probably why we were sold out so early. But we've never been sold out, so it's definitely an effective tool. But if you want a selector, make sure you register and you lock it down, and then it's yours, and you don't have to worry about someone coming in and swiping it. Um, so that's our force composition. I will do a quick aside for the armies in the Case Blue book. Those national rules that are in there are permitted. So Italy, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, those are permitted. Just let me know if you're playing one of those minor powers that already has national rules in the core book. If you're switching over to Case Blue, just let me know. Um, all right, Brad. So moving on, let's talk about the team format a little bit. We have Axis versus Allies. It's the way the Gajograd has always been. The Allies haven't won, I think, for the last 2 years. So, Mike Adamson is captaining the Allies this year, and he is really gung ho about making sure the Allies, pull out the victory. But with this format, it's a team format, but you have the table sectors to kind of keep it close and to make sure that no one has pressure on them unless they want to have some pressure on them. But Brad, when it comes down to winning a table sector, what do you think? Is there anything special that it requires or any thought that goes into it maybe before the game, or is it just win your table?
well, it a little bit goes into so you have the select the different tables are grouped into these different selectors, but then you also have your objective tables, and I think we'll talk about that more in a second. But so at least how I did it last year was which objective tables are the most important, and then kind of fitting in the pieces of taking the sectors themselves and understanding that. And so that was kind of a secondary choice slash felt like something we needed to build more up to as a team as thing people got kind of used to it. Um, so this year I don't we're not going to be assigning tables. In the past we could kind of assign at least a little bit, kind of put our thumb on the scale. So this year it'll be interesting of I think it'll be more important to have more versatile lists. Last year we did have a couple of lists. It's like, okay, you're our shoe in for this particular terrain type. So there's going to be a little bit less of that this year. So yeah, being kind of more flexible in a wider sense to lists, I think will help. And then yeah, it kind of just becomes I don't know, just trust your players and let them just kind of see how it shakes out. I guess there's maybe perhaps that was a weakness on my side, but yeah, it wasn't necessarily like how to cap each individual sector and okay, we got to win these 3 tables out of these 4 or things like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you mentioned that the captains assigned players last year, and so we had the players rotate their tables, but then the captains were able to select 2 objective tables and who was going to play on them. So I like that idea because I like again the strategy of placing your players where you think they're going to succeed and going after objectives. But again, what that tended to lead to was some real real imbalanced matchups, uh, and that's something we're really looking to avoid again this year. So the
yeah,
way that that's working this year is players are going to be matched up, winners and winners. We've talked about this before, uh, but the captain will see where his players will be, and then you'll know the table and the terrain and uh, the objective that is assigned to that table. And then as a captain, you're just going to look at that and you're going to say, well, this player got assigned to this table, and I know he's a strong player and his army suits the terrain, and this bonus from the objective would be nice. Let's call this table an objective table. So really the captains are only selecting which table is going to be the objective table. This year they're not assigning players to it.
And I think, you know, in any tournament, right, there's some levers you have to pull. And so that losing that capability from last year, I think is totally worth it to just make sure there's better games for everyone involved. And it does become interesting because I do feel like kind of the Axis team last year, we kind of had a solved game. We're like, okay, we're for sure going for these bonuses turn one, these bonuses turn two, these bonuses turn three. So it is kind of fun that, yeah, the captains will have to on the fly go, well, these are the bonuses I like, and we really need them, and it'd be nice to have them in this order. But maybe it's a brand new player or, you know, someone who doesn't want all that pressure on them because sometimes people just don't need that extra pressure. They're there to have roll some dice, and they don't need to feel like they could let the team down. And like that's cool, right? You know, making sure everyone has
Yep.
a good play experience. And so I think this year it'll be fun because it's going to have to people are going to have to be a little more flexible in their plans, and so that just opens up a different aspect of kind of the strategic gaming that I think will be really cool.
Yeah, like another part of the balance is, we have 3 games in one day, which if you're just doing a bare bones event that way, it's a long day. You're fitting a lot into, a relatively short time period. So then, we're introducing this kind of strategy and objectives and assignments and all this stuff. And the balance there is adding these things to make the day fun and interesting and get that team camaraderie, but don't add too much to where it's overbearing on the player or we can't get games in on time or players are just so exhausted, especially captains, by the end of the day from running around and trying to figure all this stuff out that it's just not a good experience. So
And that's why I really like a lot of the bonuses that are available is, you know, in some tournaments and games, it's too much. Hey, it's a completely new rule. They're reworking how the core game works. It's just little bonuses that already kind of exist, and they're easier to remember, so that they can kind of. It still feels like normal bolt action with just these minor twists that don't add, yeah, so much cognitive burden as you're playing.
yeah, exactly. Well, hey, let's talk about some of these bonuses. At this point, I still have the subject to change disclaimer at the top of the bonuses list, although I feel like I have them pretty well locked down. Again, it changed from last year. A couple of the bonuses were kind of no-brainers, I feel like, uh, that were very obvious targets just because of how good they were.
Yeah.
There are also some objectives, or sorry, objective bonuses that I realized really compounded on the strengths of some armies. So, an example is I saw a, a German player was playing against a British player, and the British player, gets all these. They already have probably some of the strongest special rules in the game. Not to mention all the units and stuff they have access to. But the Allies had won a bonus to where they also get the fire and maneuver rule that the Americans have to move and shoot without a penalty. And it just became like super, super strong. And I was like, okay, that's a little bit much. I see how that compounds and gets a little bit Death Starry. So again, the balance of you want enticing bonuses that are fun to fight over and to strategize about, but you don't want to create bonuses that, if a team gets it, it's just going to be again not a great play experience. But looking at the bonuses that we do have, Brad, do any of them stand out to you as something that's really interesting or exciting, or even something like a warning sign for me?
Well,
Like let's take a look at this one.
yeah, so I actually like looking at it. I really appreciated that you removed the like get extra victory points for your team, like the doubling victory points from last year, because that one was a no brainer and didn't really let us use some of the cool, like you've come up with some really like just neat ones. There's like, oh, that's cool. I'd love to play with it, but we need the victory points one. Or like, I'm really glad that you got rid of the. It wasn't necessarily prep bombardment, but it was basically like we could put free pins on people once per turn, and like that one was like a no brainer. And we've used it. I think we used it in the last Gajograd, and I think it was also used in our Rumble in the Rubble. And
Yeah.
like that one like legitimately won me multiple games just by being able to put a couple extra pins on guys at key times. I think that one like definitely was part of the Axis winning in a few events. But looking at the bonuses you have now, I kind of looked at it from what seems like just really strong, like no brainers, go get these for your team, and others that are like, oh, you could play into these in kind of fun and interesting ways. And so Foy really stands out to me, the Foy map, because you can get the communications breakdown rule where every turn when you pull the first die, you can force a repull.
Mm-hmm.
And like, bolt action's so interesting, right? In the first couple of turns, most of the time you want to go last to get your positioning right and kind of see where the opponent is and be able to go down when necessary and kind of wait so that you don't move a unit that can be pounced on and can't go down. But then as you get later in the game, you really want to go first to get that big punch early on. And so Foy is awesome. Our Axis team won that last year. Used it to great effect and just
Yep.
forcing the redraw is just awesome.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, I like that one because you force a redraw, but it still could come up not in your favor. So it's a nice bonus, but it's also not an automatic buff, because you could want your dice and you pull your opponent's dice twice.
yeah, and it happens, but it's just one of those fun little things that puts your thumb on the scale a little bit statistically. It helps a little bit, and it's neat, and it just really helps play into just the play style of bolt action, with the action with the order dice and stuff. So I really like that one.
Hmm.
Um, the I you've changed the bonus, but I continue my love affair with the Wasatch Front, where it turns your HQ into an artillery observer. I know a lot of people really don't like artillery observers. I think they're fun. I think they're cool. They hit my kind of narrative, like this is how it would work. Wherever possible, I try to keep artillery out of my list. Not always possible, but it just feels better to me, just narratively. And so
Yeah.
I love the Wasatch Front rule where you get a free artillery observer, and man, those pins can come in at just really clutch times. And so I really anything that gets more pins out there, and also just thematically, you've made a really cool table for the Wasatch Front where it has these artillery batteries and installations, and so it's fun. Yep, we control the Wasatch Front, and so we're calling artillery strikes down on Gajograd. It's just fun.
It plays into the narrative and the story around Gajograd, and that's why I like having those tables. I think we have 4 Utah themed tables now, and doesn't play well with the World War II themes so much, but the event theme, players really seem to like playing on those tables.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to fight over a miniature version of their game store? Like that's awesome.
We had a really fun rule for that one 2 years ago now, where the objective was in the miniature version of our game store that we had 3D printed. Thank you, Doug, for designing and printing that. But every time you entered it, there's a chance on a 6 that a partisan bomb would go off and level the building, and only happened to one player, and it happened to be our good friend Andrew, who was playing partisans. So it was a bit of a friendly fire, but a lot of
Yeah,
good stories
and
around
he
that.
deserved it. He definitely deserved it.
Yes, he did.
Um,
Uh,
o-
yeah,
Other
go ahead.
bonuses that are kind of interesting. The national parks one is interesting. I love that. That was a new board that I think you built last year. Having the arch and whatnot, and
Hmm.
it's really interesting because it's stealing the opponent's objective table, and so the opponent, you could get a really cool objective bonus and maybe win one of your objective tables and maybe not the other, but then and they could just steal it from you. And I like that you specify it's a way you could get a bonus twice. And so I think it opens the opportunity for some really fun like counterintelligence play of like, okay, we know they want foy, or they if you know they're probably going to go for foy turn one, so we're going to go for foy turn two, and that way, and then we can try to steal it from them turn one, and that has one fun just to steal their abilities, but then also I think it's really interesting with the picking objective tables. Sometimes in the past, there's been really clear, like, okay, we're both choosing the same table.
Yeah.
And so only one team gets the bonus, and it can be some of like their most competitive lists on their team. And so I like that this opens up the possibility of four completely different tables could be the objective table in one turn instead of kind of people playing over the same couple that turn. And so it's a fun, like, you could do everything right, still lose your bonus. And if the
Yeah.
other team kind of out thinks you or kind of gets lucky in their order of picking tables, it's like, sweet, we got foy or something twice. So that's fun.
Yep. You can only choose an objective table once, or I'm sorry, you can only win it once. So basically, you would only get the bonus one time for the day. But that is the one objective, national parks, which could get you a bonus twice if that is enticing to you. So I do also have a little shout out to the minor nations out there. The Kalkin goal table. Minor nations who are victorious on their table score 2 points toward their respective sector instead of just one. So this is just a nice little boon for those minor nations that don't have all the big toys, like the big five do, and especially if you end up on a team with lots of minor powers. I know France and Italy are actually really common right now. I think Romania and
Well,
Hungary also have some representation, so they're out there for sure.
one as a Finland player at heart, I like anything for minor nations. I think it also it just yeah, it's cool because it only points towards capturing the sector, so it can make fighting over sectors a little more competitive without necessarily like majorly affecting like the team victory point. So I think it's a fun little thing, and it kind of does showcase the efforts that minor nations did in World War II to tip the balance. You know, uh, like for the longest time, I didn't know that much about like the Netherlands' involvement in World War II, but like
Mhm.
a lot of their merchant marine, right, the oil that they had access to, some of their submarine actions and things, and so yeah, there's so many little stories out there, and so it's fun to find a way to represent that on the tabletop.
Yeah, I think having good games and having a narrative flow, it's a good combination. And I think having the minor nations as a part of that uh, just makes for an interesting day. It makes for a good event and encourages some unique armies. And I know we have a lot of minor nation representation in our community, so it'd be cool to see them come out. And I'm excited to look at the chats leading up to the event and see if that influences anyone in there, which army they're bringing.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're talking about the different bonuses, there is one more that kind of stood out to me as
Hmm.
potentially really interesting in how it changes gameplay. Do you pronounce is it Peleliu? Is it Peleliu? Like
Pelelu.
Peleliu. That one's interesting because for indirect fire, your different units always count as having a spotter. I think you called it aerial recon,
Uh-huh.
and so that one's interesting, right? Because you can hide your mortars and your medium howitzers and stuff and kind of still get your indirect fire. And you know no spoilers, but knowing some of the tables from the past couple of years, we've had some really interesting like jungle tables and things like that where getting line of sight is really hard. And at least in my experience, a lot of the kind of our local meta, and I don't know about the global meta, but just we do have a lot of people that love their indirect fire. And
Oh
so
yes.
making it specifically something you have to fight really hard for as an objective table to give people the opportunity to use their indirect fire on some of these denser maps. I think it's going to be interesting. It might be really, really strong, but at least it's balanced by the fact that the different table setups and just I love the wide variety of terrain and table styles that Gajograd has. One game you can be playing in the super dense jungle with really short lines of sight. Next game you could be playing, in a big desert with very little cover, and so you have to be ready for everything. And so I think, yeah, Palu just really helps with that.
Yeah, I think it also encourages maybe armies to lean into that. Uh, if you decide as a team like, hey, let's focus on maybe the Pelelu table as one of our objectives, then maybe you build your army around having a gun line. As a Romanian player, I get a free medium howitzer. I always take a second medium howitzer, and I can easily take a third. Um, just with their rules, I love playing gunline armies. Mostly because I don't think my strategy skills are that great, but having a lot of big HE is helpful. But yeah, again, it just goes towards the intention of these bonuses. Is doesn't change the game in any crazy way. Won't be too much overhead for players on the day, but does give you something to plan for and strategize for and fight for on the day. But Brad, so let's jump into kind of the last thing we wanted to cover tonight. Let's look at the scenarios. We've always run rulebook missions. I think in almost every event that we've had, not just the Gajograd ones. We've played these scenarios a lot. And version 2 of Bolt Action has been out for a long time now. These scenarios have been played. Some of them are really good, and some of them are, they're always fresh. But it's good to, introduce some new ones, I think, and kind of get players' brains working a little bit differently. So for Gajograd Ablaze, we're going to be using exclusively the Bolt Action Alliance pack. This is a pack that has, I believe, 8 or 9 brand new missions in it, but the first 6 of them are specifically designed to be balanced. But these 6 missions, they're all objective-based missions. So I think you have anywhere from 3 to 5 objectives on the table. There are a couple that also give you points for killing order dice or say having some of your units in the opponent's deployment zone. But really, objectives are the important thing with this scenario pack. So we have 6 missions there that we're pulling from. It is going to be random. And the idea behind that is players know which missions could be played. They know it's only going to be these 6, so I only need to, read these 6 missions before the day of, get familiar with them. But you won't know exactly which 3 of those 6 are going to be played, so you can't exactly tailor your army to the scenarios that are going to be played, if that makes sense. Again, just keeping players on their toes, increasing the likelihood that you'll have good conversation in the Discord servers and the strategy sessions. And then finally with this pack, there's no prep bombardment in any of the missions. I got on a bit of a soapbox about prep bombardment when I was on a different podcast, the Cast Ice podcast with Brad. Different Brad, Australian Brad. But again, last year just saw how prep bombardment could really make for some feel bads and poor gaming experiences. So there's not going to be any prep bombardment at all for this event. I think that's written into those scenarios as well. But
I really like that. You were talking about play styles, right? And you really like the gunline play style, and that's awesome. But like for me, I really like the mobile play style, and thematically, I don't mind prep bombardment. Makes sense to me, but man, it just stinks sometimes when I've got this plan, I'm going to move out really aggressively, really quick. Oh, I got pins, and I didn't clear my pins, and sometimes it does make it feel like turn one is just, all right, I'll pass, kind of a thing.
I'll do a specific example from last year. We had Doug, who's a very good player, and Mike, who's also a very good player, on our most open table. I don't mind having a table that's pretty open. Again, you got to kind of be ready for whatever is thrown at you. It's an open battlefield. But what happened was Mike got so many pins from the prep bombardment that he just had to roll rallies basically, and all his order checks were failing on his first turn, and because the table was open, Doug had some. I think he had at least 188, maybe two, and he was kind of just punching through Mike's stuff, and Mike literally couldn't do anything about it,
Yeah, just
and
eternally pinned.
eternally pinned, and just because of some poor dice rolls on that prep bombardment, that's not really the kind of experience you want to like give someone, and I felt bad for Mike, and also I like Doug is such a good guy. Like I know he wasn't super enjoying just like slaughtering Mike, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think
so
that's one of the interesting things, right? Like you can lean more into the simulation aspect of wargaming, right? Where like, okay, yeah, like there's artillery bombardments, but then there's also it's a game. We're playing a game, and so something like prep bombardment was kind of out of your hands and you can't really react to it makes the game less fun. And like let's be honest, bolt action isn't the most simulation-y game. Like we're all playing an 80s action movie version of World War II, and so yeah, anything that lets you just play the game.
yep, I'll say it again. It's about balancing all the different things that make a good day of bold action a good day of bold action. So prep bombardment more times than not makes for a bad day of bold action. So it's gone. Um, so Brad, I was just kind of harping on how important objectives were in these missions. So players, if you're coming, please read up on those first 6 missions in the Bold Action Alliance pack. There is a link in the event pack that takes you to them. For whatever reason, if you're having any trouble, please let me know. I'll get them to you. But because these missions are so objective based, we really ought to talk about what's going on with capturing objectives at Gajograd.
Yeah.
This is kind of a big overhaul, but what I've seen a lot of is, you have say I have 20 dudes on an objective, two 10-man infantry squads. They're on the objective. It's mine. And then say you, Brad, you have a lieutenant who has somehow survived all the shots and just runs onto the objective. It's now contested, and you've got one dude on there. I've got 20. I've got 2 different units, but now the objective is contested. It's not mine. It's lame. It's lame when that happens, and that example is actually happened in a game with Drake a little while ago. He had all these dudes on the objective. My lieutenant, survived all the firing and ran onto the objective, and then it ended up in a draw when really Drake ought to have won that game. So we've made changes to how objective works. But basically what's happening is an objective is yours. Or sorry, let me start that over. To claim an objective, you need at least 1 infantry unit within 3 inches of the center. And they need to be there at the end of a turn with no enemy units within 3 inches. So once you claim that objective, it's yours until the opponent comes and takes it. And to take it, of course, they have to remove all your units off that objective and end the turn on it. So, we started this episode by talking about the game that you and I played recently, Brad, and we tried out this way of playing objectives. What is your thought around how that went? Do you have any kind of takeaways or advice or?
I really enjoyed it. I think honestly, the only reason I won our game is because we were using those rules. Because I like my mobile play style, so I was pretty aggressive early on, and I kind of ran out in front of one of your howitzers and your medium machine gun, and you shredded one of my 10-man infantry squads like right in the beginning. But enough of them survived to cap the middle objective, and then that's when your infamous flamethrower choked at the end of the game. But getting out there early and holding the objective, and then just keeping a handful of guys there, and then the nice thing is the objective control is sticky, right? So there was one time I captured an objective and I needed to move to the other objective, and so it was nice knowing I could leave the objective. It still stayed mine unless you got to it, and so
Yep.
it kind of let you avoid. Okay, I got to put this guy on the back objective, and he can't do anything. So I really
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, I liked being able to kind of have that risk reward of running out in front of your gun line, but then locking down an objective before you could completely kind of mount that counterattack. One other thing I think was really interesting is I don't know if it's in all of the missions. I think it's in a good chunk of them. Is it's that like 50-50 staggered deployment, right? We had half of our points on the board and the other half in reserve, and I felt like it gave us more room to maneuver, and it was very like, okay, do I put my mortar down and give me suppressing fire from the beginning because otherwise my mortar will show up and can't shoot this turn two, or do I get some more infantry squads out to run out and get the objective when there's less firepower on the board? And so the new objective control rules mixed with kind of a lot of these missions having reserves, I think it adds for a lot of dynamic play, and it's harder to lock down the entire sector of like the whole table, I should say,
Yep.
quickly. And so it's fun because it does feel like, okay, our little platoons are meeting, they're kind of hitting resistance, they're going around different sides, and it makes the game feel more dynamic to me.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that you might want to get on objectives quickly. Uh because once it's yours, it's more difficult for the opponent to take that away from you. Say we played normal objective capturing rules. I believe you and I would have drew.
We
Or
would
I
have.
might yeah.
You
Uh
had the your left objective. I had the right objective. You had plenty of guys in the center. We would have absolutely had a draw, but
yeah.
because I technically got there first and got really lucky with that flamethrower.
Yep.
Well, and the other interesting thing about that is because of how the objective play worked, I didn't have to bring up my one reserve squad, and so into the center, and I was able to send it to your right flank, and that really helped me make sure I actually took the right objective.
Yeah. Yeah, that opened up a lot of interesting choices. And I like what you're talking about, the reserves and do I put down my big artillery piece or do I just put my infantry or my fast transports and try and get on those objectives quick? But if you're on the objective turn one, more likely than not you are putting your guys in a vulnerable position to be shot off the board. So I think there's some give and take there, which I really like. I also really like the idea of, a squad claims an objective and they're whittled down to one man and the enemy is pouring in, but they can't kill the last guy and the last guy holds the objective, like some kind of Hollywood movie or something. I think that can make for some pretty fun stories. But
Yeah, I mean, look at the story we have of my
oh yeah,
lieutenant and his aide, and like the three random guys from the first squad that got there holding out. You had what, your lieutenant, his aide, a flamethrower team, and I think a rifle team and a howitzer shooting at him. Like it was very cinematic.
the funny part about that was I think I hit that squad turn one with my howitzer.
You did. You killed
Uh,
like seven of them turn one.
Yep, but they passed their morale check and they stayed on the board. And I remember saying that's going to cost me the game, and it literally did because they were the ones holding that objective.
I was missing having my Finland special rules right about then, because then they could have upgraded to veterans to be even more annoying.
Yeah, that's such a strong rule. It's funny, I've not played Finns yet, so we'll have to do a rematch where you run your Finns. I'd be interested to see how that goes. Um, But yeah, so that's the objectives again. Like kind of the minutia of how these objectives work is in the player pack. So please make sure you read that and you are aware of it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Just so you know, if you haven't yet registered, if you're listening this to maybe decide if you want to come or not, um, fighting vehicles and armored transports may not claim objectives; they can only contest. Soft skin transports, units inside transports, medics, spotters, or artillery and chaplains are ignored for the purposes of scoring. So don't build your army list around wanting those units to score. But Brad, I think that just about wraps up, what we have in store for Gajograd Ablaze. I'm super excited for this one. I think we've learned a lot over the last couple years, and it's all going to kind of culminate into this one day of celebrating the community, getting a bunch of team camaraderie going, and giving the players, a team to fight for and objectives to fight for. And nothing's better than raising the flag over Gajograd.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, with these, kind of events going year to year, the story keeps growing. The the stakes feel like they're higher, as everyone's kind of honors on the line, as allies are feeling a little bit like an underdog. They're hungry for the win, and yeah, it creates a lot of fun. It's building like our little local dynasty.
It's the most fun to see it grow and see the community get involved and into it, and even just kind of how other members of the community have put on their own events, and uh, just to watch this this community just flourish. It has been such a treat, and it's been so much fun. So, if you are interested in registering for Gajograd Ablaze, again, it is April 20th, 2024 at Gajo Games in Sandy, Utah. I'll have a link in the video description below with all that information with the player pack. Inside the player pack is my contact info for how to register. Right now, we are at 10 players out of 30, and that's just those who have registered. I know we have some interested, some players who haven't officially registered yet. So if you want to get in, make sure you register so you can lock down your theater selector, get exactly the army you want. And once you register, you get to be put inside those team Discord servers, and teams can start discussing strategy and army lists and all those good things. Just so you guys know, the Allied captain this year is Mike Adamson. And then on the Axis side, we have John R. So I don't know your last name off the top of my head. But these guys are both, very consistent members of the community. They've both done events on their own. They're always looking to help, and they have some of the best hats in the community, in which we do have a best hat award this year.
Well, that's good.
Because we have some really fancy headwear. Of course, please don't wear anything that is disrespectful. I shouldn't have to put that disclaimer out, but I'm going to do it anyways. It is World War II, so please be really generic. But that award is out there. But hey, Brad, thank you so much for coming on and then talking this all through with me. And I look forward to rolling dice with you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time.